And so let me ask you this. I mean, these evangelicals, like, do they really believe this stuff? Like, is it so ingrained in them? And let's start with the pastors, the ones preaching it. Are they really that brainwashed into thinking that, you know, Israel is God's chosen people and just all of the stuff? And again, this is like real talk, it's I think we're past the point of feeling uncomfortable talking about this. Like, are these pastors believing this stuff, or are they doing it because they're getting a paycheck and they're on retainer with somebody?
Yeah. Well, I think most of the time there's no official agreements, there's no official retainer, things like that. That's one in 100 maybe that there's
Mm,
something like that going on where there's actually some kickback in some way. Okay. I do think that the majority of the time it is a true belief, and it is not, they're not having to fake it. However, I think that you have to take it on a case by case basis. I think that the majority of what's happened is they used to be all in where they really believed it. Now that there's people like me, and it's not just me, there's a lot of people like me that are bringing up things that they can't quite deny or that they've never really even looked at, like the
right,
USS Liberty. And
right,
use, like, let's use that as an example because it's such a stark one. They'll be presented with that. They'll want to quickly protect their theology. So the first thing they're doing, what can we look up to tell us that the USS Liberty was an accident, that it was
right,
not intentional? Well, Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager are right there, ready and willing to say this was an accident, and it's used by anti-Semites to say that Israel has some kind of stranglehold over America, even to the point we could bomb one of their top intelligence ships and get away with it and cover it up. Like, we
right.
would never do that. You're our greatest ally. So they'll quickly find that stuff, and then that's enough. It's like, that's enough. I'm going to stop digging. Okay. It's really hard for both the people in the pews, so the Christians that attend the churches, and for the ministers who have been honestly come to believe a lot of these things, because the deception is a really long thing. Okay. It's been a really long time. You could say that medical, the real push for childhood vaccines and stuff, that's
Mm,
been 2, 3, 4 decades of indoctrination now. Okay.
yeah,
Since they really, because you go back 3 decades when I was a kid, there was like a couple vaccines,
right,
7
right,
maybe.
right.
Now the schedule is like, well, here's 74 different vaccines that your child needs. That has been a process over decades. So that's a long time. So for them, with COVID and with all of the deception that was so obvious to those who chose to pull themselves out of the bias, just they decided, I'm not going to be cognitive dissonant. I'm going to use my brain.
Yeah,
There was a price to be paid for it. But if you were in the medical community, you could lose your job over it. If you were a
right,
doctor, you absolutely could be blacklisted from your hospital and who you get your paycheck from. If you'd written books based on the topic of vaccines in a pro way, imagine turning around on that and saying, I was fooled by these international institutions and by the pharmaceutical companies
yeah,
and those people are powerful. Well, now imagine it's not medical, it's spiritual and theological. So you're
yeah,
not going
yeah.
against a medical doctor anymore or a hospital. You're going against your pastor who you respect and your church community and the social life involved with that. It's even harder.
That
Okay.
that's an amazing analogy you just made, like, thinking about and I don't even know where you netted out on COVID because we didn't know each other then, so you can share that in a second, but, like, that's an amazing analogy, and you're totally right. There are those doctors and actually, gosh, I don't know if you've had them on or I'm definitely gonna try, like, Doctor Peter McCullough and who else? Doctor Robert Malone, maybe you've had some of these guys on.
I've had Peter McCullough on twice.
You have, okay, okay. So he really I mean, man, he was really going against everything and was really crushed. So that's an incredible analogy to say, now the folks like yourself, like maybe Pastor Matt First, Pastor Steven Anderson, some of the Pastor Chuck Baldwin that we've talked about, and we're gonna get him on hopefully together and do a show with him.
Right. Yes.
these guys, very similar to the medical doctors that were willing to even ask questions about the
Yeah.
COVID vaccine.
Yes.
Man, so they're getting crushed. And like, tell us about your relationship. Like, I know things have changed for you in the Christian community.
Do you mind if I stop and make a point about those pastors that have
Yeah,
chosen to make a change?
I would love that.
So almost all of those guys, they didn't there are people who are brought up in the school of the reformed theology that don't buy into dispensationalism.
Mhm.
There's a lot of Catholics that never bought into it because they weren't that it did not infiltrate
Never
their
bought into dispensationalism. Okay,
yes, or the rapture or modern day Israel being, Abraham and God's chosen people.
got it. And really quick for anyone new listening who may have not have heard this before, can you give just a and actually this is crazy, but I probably can as well. But can you give a top line on dispensationalism? A real like basic so people know what that is.
Yeah. Well, it's a man-made system of stages throughout history, okay, that were all God ordained, all right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that piece of it that, hey, maybe there are these stages throughout human history where God deals with people or his people in various ways and asks different things of us. For instance, the Old Testament would be the Old Covenant. We got to keep the law, and it was still based around faith, though. You go to the New Testament, and the law was merely meant to paint a picture of Jesus Christ who embodied the word. He embodied the law. And, he said, the law and the prophets are fulfilled in me. Right. And so now the approach is we follow him rather than we follow a set of rules. So that would be an example of two, if you want to call it dispensations, I would call those covenants. But John Nelson Darby back in the 1830s came up with an organized system. It had been floated by some various people. Interestingly enough, Jesuit priests were trying to infiltrate Protestant theology, and they were throwing in all these things with books. John Nelson Darby took a lot of that stuff, put it together into a system, called it dispensationalism, and he flat out said, I am the originator of this system. And he said, we have to be careful when disseminating this information because it's like new wine. And if you put new wine into old wineskins, it'll burst. And he's like, this scares people. So these ideas of the rapture are new. This idea of all of the Jews returning to Israel and we must bless them in order to be blessed. Now he didn't think it was new. He thought he'd rediscovered it
Mm.
after, 1,000+ years since the fall of the temple. So he basically was saying, in that sense, I have rediscovered something and I'm reanimating something and now remarketing it to the church, but I got to be careful because it's going to feel brand new.
Was
Okay.
John Nelson Darby Jewish or Christian or what was that guy?
Want the full truth? Watch the full Deep Shallow Dive interview next. And hit subscribe if you're done with narratives and ready to call a spade a spade.